Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today's guest is Josh Goldberg, and he's going to tell us about his career and getting into his own practice here and spend some time overseas as well. And I think something that we have in common. So, of particular interest to me is time in China there. So, thank you, Josh, for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Josh, maybe you can start and tell a little bit more about that journey there and what got you into law in the first place and what brought you to where you are today.
As far as law goes, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was a little kid. I was, kind of dorky kid who instead of was watching cartoons, I was watching like legal TV shows after school. Like I was, like watching things like LA Law instead of the things that most, like 10-year-olds would want to watch. And yeah, so like it was just always something that I dreamed of, and it was always in the back of my mind. And then in my second year of university, I started studying about China, and I decided to learn Chinese. Essentially, it was just kind of a random decision based on, I was inspired by a professor that I had, and so I got a scholarship. I went off to Taiwan for a year, and then came back and finished my degree. And then I decided that I wasn't quite ready. I was surprised by the end of the university that my grades were good enough to go to law school, which I was happy about. But I decided to take an extra few years to, go back to China, strengthen my Mandarin, like actually learn it properly so I could say I speak it. Because after a year, it's really not enough. Like even though like it was not bad after a year, like nobody can say they're even like speak it at an advanced level after that long. It's a very, very, in some ways, it's a very challenging language. In some ways, it's not as challenging. Like there's no inflections like in some languages. There's no he, she, there's no past, present, future tenses, no masculine, feminine like there is in French. So that makes it a little easier, but the pronunciation and the tones and whatnot make it very challenging. Same with the writing system is obviously very complicated. So when I finished, I decided to go back. I went with a friend of mine. We decided to essentially do a little bit of traveling, like travel for 3 months, settle down somewhere for 3 months, travel for 3 months. So, we were in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and mainly China. And we spent a lot of time all over the country, mainly in Beijing. That's where we spent most of our time. And also I spent some more time studying in a city called Changsha, which is in, I guess it's South Central China. It's where Chairman Mao is from, actually. So, and yeah, and then, when all that was done, I spent a year in Australia with my future husband. And then we came back here when I got approved, when I got, when I got accepted to law school.
So let's talk maybe about law school there. So it's kind of not a straight journey there, right? I mean, a lot of time overseas, and we'll get back to China, I think, because you go back there while you're in law school. So, what do you think? I mean, because a lot of times I get this question from students, whether it's law school, whether it's paralegals that I'm teaching, about doing some things there and not going straight into law school. Right? How did you find did you feel like, okay, well, now I'm ready? Or did you feel it's harder to, after you're doing all of those things, to say, well, I'm ready to go into law school and leave kind of the traveling and all the adventures you had
I mean,
right before?
There's always pros and cons for everything. Like it was definitely living a life of traveling for 3 years is definitely an adjustment, but I was definitely ready to, to settle down to some degree and do something. Like I never had the personality to just kind of spend my life traveling anyway. So, it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to settle down doing something. And, I couldn't really picture myself doing anything but the law. Like I love history, but it's, being a history professor was not my goal or not something I wanted to do. I had always wanted to be a lawyer. So it worked out really well. Like there was no real adjustment. If anything, I felt a lot more confident than I did when I left. I think, spending a lot of time alone overseas just forces you to learn how to do shit and be your own person and grow. So when I came back and started law school, I was really, really confident, not overconfident like some of the like the A uh, those type A students that you encounter, but like confident in my own skin, and I was really happy, and I was I felt well adjusted there, and it felt like the right time. I think I did it in the perfect time for me.
And what was law school like? I mean, did you kind of have an idea of what you wanted to do afterwards, or you were kind of still figuring out?
To
I
be
mean,
honest, I had no idea. I initially thought I wanted to do something like human rightsy when I started, and then I wanted to do something, international law, and nobody really knows when they start what they want. And then, um, I spent thanks because of the China connection. I was originally, or at some point, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go study in China and like build up a profile there and move back there after to live there. Although my husband, who's Chinese, did not want to do that, but I had to at least like, see what it was like to live in China as a lawyer. So in my second year, I did an exchange there. But when I came back, um, I realized that's just really not for me, and I wanted to stay in Canada. I really like Canada. I really love Toronto, and I also, just by coincidence, I took a class that just really, really, really appealed to me. Insurance law of all courses doesn't sound very sexy, but it was my favorite, like my favorite course of all time in law school. I think I got an A plus, which I've never gotten in another course. And yeah, like I decided from there on that I was either going to do insurance defense or personal injury, which is like two sides of the same coin essentially, and not how we describe it in Ontario. So that was how it played out, and then from then on, it was kind of I started doing internships in the field, and
all right, so let's kind of go back there to China since you went back there. What was it like studying law? I mean, I know you had all those adventures and travels before, but I mean, I think it's pretty unique. I mean, I guess maybe you don't know, but so my students know that I spent a few years teaching law in China, so it was quite a different perspective there. There was a couple
yeah.
people I think that were studying. I think there was someone from Winnipeg I remember at the school I was at, but pretty rare.
Mhm.
And what was that experience like being in classes there? I mean, I don't know how your Mandarin had progressed at that point in terms of being able to listen to like lectures and just the style compared to what you were doing in law school back here.
So I went to Peking University for the semester that I went there. It was a program called, I can't remember the actual program, but it was like an LLM in Chinese law for Western people. So even though I mean, I don't want to say I could have studied in Chinese. I don't know how if my Chinese was that good, but I the courses were all in English, and it was geared towards like foreigners essentially coming over and learning about the Chinese legal system. I to be honest, I had a lot of trouble picking things up because it was um, no disrespect to the program, but I really didn't find that the teachers really taught things in a very organized or like just not a way that really related to me. So I didn't really get that much out of the program, except for knowing that I prefer Ontario law, and I think I want to continue to work in Canada at that point. But it was interesting. It was a different time. Like the other times I was in China, I was a lot younger, and it was a lot easier to meet people, especially in some of living in a smaller city. It's a lot easier to make friends. In a bigger city like Beijing, like it's a lot harder because like people come and they think, oh, I'm the only foreigner who came here to study Chinese, and then there's like a million other people who also are in the same position as them, and people get very people are a little competitive and not as friendly as in some of the other places I've lived. So um, it wasn't, it wasn't that easy to make friends that time. And uh, I was also a lot older. I was much less interested in partying by that time. So, like going out and clubbing wasn't as fun, which is, one of the ways I made friends in my youth. Um, yeah,
Yes, and I can certainly attest to that. That I mean, Chongqing was interesting because it was large, but it was not so discovered. Let's say in at least in certain
yeah,
pockets. So there were the same core people, and I think that the toughest thing was always people would come for like a short period of time and then leave, and then you'd have to make new group of friends and so
yeah,
forth, right? And I think when you had that experience before, kind of going, coming, that it's hard to get some kind of
yeah.
continuity, right? So.
Well, I mean, there are two complications on top of everything else when I went there. The first one was that it was just before the Summer Olympics, and they were literally trying to get rid of every single foreigner who, like wasn't a dignitary or something, like who wasn't somebody important. So they were pretty much canceling, not just like, not extending, but like canceling visas, and making it so that like you just could not stay. Like my program was supposed to end like, sometime after I think the Olympics, and I originally had a visa that went that far, and then they decided that my visa would be expired before then because they wanted me and everybody out before the Olympics. So that was a bit of a challenge. And the second challenge that was a much bigger challenge was I actually got sick when I was there. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Um, and yeah, so just out of nowhere, I got very, very sick, and my husband was there, thankfully, at that time. So we had to fly home to Montreal, and where I'm originally from, and I had surgery and radiation that summer, and then went back to school the next year.
I'm glad everything worked out there. I mean, I know I had to go to the hospital once in China. It wasn't the I think I had like a whole room of people just staring at me. I'm like, this clearly can't be an ethical thing, but it was curiosity, I suppose.
All I'm
But
gonna say is I have some interesting stories about hospital stay in China, but
uh, but yeah, so then you come back. I mean, you survive through this, this scare here, and you're like, okay, now I've had this experience. I'm not going to go back to Taiwan or China or Hong Kong and practice law there. And you have that insurance law course. Now, what happens after law school in terms of how do you get into having your own practice here today?
so I guess where to begin. So I mean, when I started articling, I to be honest, I had a very hard time. Like a lot of students, I had a very hard time getting an articling job. Actually, I was a terrible, interviewer. I was just constantly like nervous to the point that I could barely get a sentence out. So it ended up being like a real problem. Like I think a lot of students go through that, unfortunately. Like they just get nervous. They feel the weight of what it is on them, and they do poorly. So it took me a while of like working on my interviewing skills and getting more confident, so that I finally did get an articling job. It was in a personal injury firm where I stayed for about 5 years. Um, Over that time, I started to kind of think one day maybe I'll open my own firm, but I want to do it differently. I want some kind of remote firm. I don't want it to just be like a traditional firm. Like I just the idea of like spending like $10,000 to have everybody like micromanaged in a stuffy office where like the boss is swarming over them. It's just not my style. I went after 5 years. I went to another firm where I stayed for another 5 years, and at that firm I had a lot more freedom. And in fact, at one point I actually hurt my back, and I was actually working from home. Like they were very, very good to me. And Pace Law Firm, by the way, um, amazing firm. I loved my time there. But they were very good to me. They let me work from home as long as I needed. Um, but it also made me realize that you can get a lot accomplished even from home. Um, Fast forward a few years, and then I joined another firm the first day of the COVID lockdown. Like, I accepted the job like a few weeks before the whole thing started, and my first day was coincidentally scheduled for the first day of the lockdown. So, I went in my first day, they gave me, like my login, my passwords, and then sent me home. And I worked for 9 months from home. I met colleagues all remotely. I met clients all remotely, worked on cases remotely. It was a strange situation, but it just reinforced my feeling that this virtual law firm idea could work. And it just felt like the right time. Like it was, good opportunity to do it and not get, hammered for, oh, why don't you have a physical office? We do have a physical office, that being said, but it's not a traditional office. It's actually my in-laws' apartment. They live in China most of the year, and because of COVID, they're essentially trapped in China until things calm down a little with the travel restrictions. So we've turned this into a pseudo office, but um, yeah, that was my plan. So I picked up and I started my own firm in November of 2020. Um, it was scary, but a lot of fun. Started with 0 clients. Like my goal has always been to build, not destroy bridges. So I've never, every time I've left a law firm, I've never taken clients with me unless they're, like a client that I brought to the firm. And so I literally started with 0 clients because I didn't want to start breaking or destroying bridges at that point. Like I wanted to maintain that. And it's worked out pretty well so far. Like in about 6+ months, I've built up my roster of clients, enough that I've got a semi full practice now, and I'm busy enough. So,
All right, so let's talk about that because I mean it's kind of in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, I don't know if we were right in the middle of that second wave and second lockdowns and things in November, but at that point, I mean, you saw that you can do a remote practice, you can be virtual, you can meet clients virtually, but what about kind of just running your own business right now? Where did you kind of pick up those skills? I've had this conversation probably dozens of times with other sole practitioners like ourselves that don't really learn that in school as much as you learn you learn the theoretical areas of
100%.
law, and then some of the stuff in practice, even what accounting software to use, or how do you keep track of things in terms of your time and books and things like that. So how did you kind of make that, like, this is what I'm going forward, won't have any clients, but now's the time. I see that the remote thing is working, but what else kind of pushed you into that direction, and what did you find in your first 90 days, let's say, of practice, of the things that you know now that you didn't know then?
Um, so number one, accounting in law firms is a pain in the fucking ass, and it's you need a really good bookkeeper. I had, oh my God, my books were such a mess. We hired, to be honest, a very expensive but very experienced bookkeeper, and she's thankfully saved me a lot of law society fines because she's really helped me organize things. But it's, the accounting and bookkeeping aspect of things is not easy, and it's really not. Like, I don't want to talk about, I know some people don't want to get into programs and whatnot, but like the program I was initially using was not intuitive, and it made life a nightmare. Like I didn't know how to do even like the simplest thing, like add an expense to the file. So having this bookkeeper really saved a lot of hassle and sadness later on when the law society inevitably audits my practice. Um, the other thing that I was surprised that I actually enjoyed a lot was branding. Like I've had a lot of fun with building the brand on online, on social media, developing things like a logo, like all this little stuff is actually, I had no idea what, I never had any practice for it, so I really didn't expect what it was, or I had no idea what it was going to be like. But I really, really have grown to enjoy it. Like I actually enjoy doing my, every day, like, I work on my social media accounts. Like I try and post every day. And I actually, normally this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And, like doing stuff like this is, like part of it. Um, just trying to get my name out and, you know, it's a really interesting aspect to it. The other thing that, I was very lucky is I have a husband who's a CPA and who like, his job is essentially doing, like the finances for companies. So he was able to map out, like the finances for the firm for the first like year of practice, which really helped a lot, from like, what we're going to start with and how many clients and, what we expect by year one, et cetera. And we got very lucky, like, or I was very lucky, I should say, in that I had somebody like that because most people don't. They don't have any, anybody to really guide them in the finance aspect of things. And it's not an easy thing to, to just pick up. Like if you don't know finance, you don't know finance, right? It's not something you can just like pick up a book and understand.
Now, with that, I mean, I think the other thing here that students often have when people make that transition from being, an associate or working at
Mm.
a firm and then opening their own practice, what did you notice in terms of just your day to day that was different, or addressing files, or trying to get clients? I mean, I know you talked about obviously the branding there being important that you wouldn't really touch probably at the firm at Pace certainly, but what else did you find different in terms of now being on your own versus your experiences at all the other firms you were
I
at?
mean, hustling, like at Pace, for example, like I was very fortunate because they have such a strong marketing department that, like the clients just were given to me. Like I didn't have to lift a finger to get any clients. But obviously that doesn't happen when you have your own firm. So, it was really hustling, which I've never had to do in my life. And it was a little daunting, but you again, like anything else, you get a taste for it and you start to learn how to do it. And I made a lot of connections in the first, I don't know, like in the first 3 months, I had made probably like 30 connections that maybe even more that were sending me a little work here and there. And it adds up when you're a small firm, you don't need like, a huge influx of files every week. Like, like I was kind of at the point where after, the first month I was getting about like 5 new clients a week, which is a good number for somebody as small as me. And like I just kept that up by continuing to hustle. I mean, I've slowed it down a little bit because like that's the point where I don't think I can accommodate, until I hire more people, I don't think I can accommodate more than, the 4 or 5 files I'm opening a week because I'm getting too busy, but not a bad problem to have, of course. But yeah.
Now, so you're talking about hustling, you're talking about branding, you're talking about building and continuing to, not burn down bridges there from the past, but maybe you could share about, some of the other things there in terms of networking and seeking
Mm,
out mentorship. I mean, I think a lot of students in particular feel a little apprehension of, okay, well, how do I connect with someone like Josh or JP? And especially, in a pandemic where it's a little bit different, you maybe have to send out emails and it's harder to kind of build
yeah.
that relationship through that, or maybe through LinkedIn or something. But what have you found work for you over the last
Well, like
months there?
I'll honestly, just to be very, very honest, I used to be the exact same way. I was very, very nervous about networking. It made me feel really uncomfortable. I wanted to just be able to, rely on my work product and, like sadly the world doesn't work like that. And knowing people, it sounds like a networking kind of to some people sounds stupid. It sounds like, oh, well, again, I just want to rely on my good work. Like, why should I have to spend time doing, like making new friends? But the reality is, making new friends really does help you go far. And, I guess in terms of networking, number one, the one I think I tell everybody is just be nice to people. I've made like a career of being nice to every single person I meet, whether they're the cleaner in the building or, the big boss at the firm. Like, you just have to be nice to people. People respect you if you're nice to them, especially when you don't get good news. Like I work for somebody who's notorious for like hanging up the phone on people when, like somebody didn't want to offer him like what he thought a case was worth. Um, and that's not a good way to make friends. Like sometimes you don't hear what you want to hear, but like as long as you're nice to people, they'll remember you, and hopefully they'll like respect you more in the future. And when they do have some discretion, they might use it to help you. So, that's one thing. And the second thing is you just have to go out and meet people. Like I just literally, especially because of the pandemic, it made sorry, I just need to adjust. Because of the pandemic, it made networking a little less intense. I found like I was able to just send lots of emails and then have lots of phone calls. Like didn't have to like rush around to like have coffee meetings with people or lunches, like we would have, in the old days. And that does like make it a lot less awkward. Like I think if I was meeting people in person, I would be a little more reserved, but on the phone, my personality comes out more. So, that's a good way to do it. And like most people are surprisingly open to other people networking. Most people like helping people. I love helping people. Like when people come to me, like no matter how small a thing it is, like I try to find a way to help them. So, I think a lot of people are like that, and I think people should be more comfortable going out and networking and meeting people, because they'll get a lot more out of their career, I think.
Now, I mean, your practice starts in the pandemic. So, what was, I mean, compared to maybe when you were working in a firm there with the things in person, what have you noticed in terms of changes from how things have been done? I mean, aside from the obvious, the virtual stuff that you were mentioning before, but in terms of hearings, in terms of matters, in terms of clients, what can you
Yeah.
share about doing things in a remote environment
Uh,
now?
well, clients, I mean, it's things have become a lot more kind of global in the sense that, you know, clients don't feel like necessarily like they need their lawyer to be like in the same small town as them. So like I've signed up a lot of clients who are all over the province, and they're happy to have me help them even though I'm in Toronto. Because it's we're I'm available. I'm just as available as somebody who lives nearby or who works in an office nearby. So I think that's been a great thing. And then, in terms of access to justice, I think it's been a really great, um, change in, I think we're going to see a lot more, or sorry, a lot less backlog in the justice system if we keep up with virtual hearings. Um, especially criminal and civil, hopefully at least, especially with the new changes to the simplified rules, the simplified uh, Rule 76, sorry, I'm having a brain fart. Uh, the new simplified procedure rules that expanded, what's available to plaintiffs now, like increased compensation. You can sue up to 200,000, no jury, shorter discoveries. All these things just make it a lot more, a lot faster and a lot more simple to get to trial and a lot less cumbersome. Like these big $1 million lawsuit cases, in the past where you'd have to go to Superior Court and run a 3-week trial over some tiny case that might be worth 200,000 if you were lucky. Um, and then you end up having you lose and you pay 150 in costs. These rules really made things a lot simpler, like shorter trials, um, limited costs, and I think with when you couple it with the virtual hearings, things are gonna move a lot faster, I think.
Now, I mean, maybe we could look at some of the different things in terms of insurance law there that, in
Mm,
particular for my students that are paralegal students here, that they can get in, and what it's like, with the files that you have. I know you do some stuff with the Social Benefits Tribunal as well, which I don't think too many people practice in that area. So maybe you can share a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with your files, and especially for the ones that are in scope for my paralegal students.
sure. I mean, most of my cases are, um, you know, one of, or there's four main types of cases I do. Like one is car accidents, so accident benefits and MVAs. And tort cases for MVAs. Um, Premises liability cases, slip and falls, whatnot. Disability policy claims, so LTD denials, and then wrongful termination. I also do, like you said, I do some of the other stuff on the side, but I do it more as pro bono. So, for example, Social Benefits Tribunal, I'm currently helping a lady who came to me through another friend who I had previously helped, win at the Social Benefits Tribunal. Um, we're appealing her CPP denial. She's got pretty bad psychological issues, and I'm doing it pro bono. I've always been a big fan of doing, like, giving back to the community. I've volunteered at Law Help Ontario for the last many years, and I try and give back by doing a little bit of pro bono work. Right now, my how much pro bono work is obviously limited, and all I've got right now is that one pro bono case. But I'm always happy to help when I can. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Right. So maybe let's look through then the motor vehicle accidents, right? In terms of what's the process from when someone comes in and says, "Hey, I was rear-ended, um, and I suffered, some back injury." What goes from there until, let's say, if it goes to a trial?
So, I mean, first off, very, very few cases go to trial. Most cases settle, thankfully. Um, but when you have, I guess, if you're injured in a car accident, you start off, generally speaking, with the accident benefits, and there's a whole process about going through it. And the main thing that we want to get the person into is treatment, because that's the first benefit that everybody has available to them, and the one benefit that is almost universally going to be helpful to them. Um, so the first thing is getting the claim started. There's a document called an OCF1 that has to be submitted and put together, which we do, and then we work with a lot of clinics around the city and get the client into a clinic that will hopefully help them get better. And then it's working with the client and making sure that they're doing everything they can to mitigate their damages. So a lot of what happens is between the client and their doctor, essentially, right? Like we try and encourage the client to see their doctor regularly, because it's important. Some clients are very badly injured, but they just don't bother going to see the doctor and don't get much medical treatment. And unfortunately, insurance companies look at these claims based on, at least in large part, based on, the paperwork available to show that they're injured. And people have little paperwork tend to be viewed as minor cases, and the more paperwork you have, the more serious an insurance company is going to view the claim. um, the other thing that we spend a lot of time doing is trying to get clients out of the minor injury guideline, which is I don't know how much I should get into this, but there's levels of treatment in Ontario with car accident benefits. So like the first level is the 3,500 minor injury guideline, and then after that you can access 65,000 if you can get out of that for a variety of reasons. Um, so a lot of what we spend our time doing at the beginning, unless there's like a very clear injury that takes them out, is getting them out of the minor injury guideline.
So I see a question here, I guess, related to that. You were talking about the doctors there, about hesitancy to go to the doctor during COVID, or are you noticing that people are just putting things off like that now, or is it
Oh,
been?
100%. That is a huge, that's a huge pet peeve of mine. And I tell clients like they don't have to physically see the doctor. They can do a video chat with the doctor or a phone call, just as long as they're like getting regular treatment and talking to them about whatever's continuing to bother them. But absolutely, like a lot of clients, they think that because they can't go physically, they say, oh well, there's no point in me going, and then they just don't go, and it doesn't help it. Especially like there's certain types of claims where that doesn't really matter, but any person who's suffering from what we call soft tissue injuries, it's very important that they're seeing the doctor regularly if they're still suffering from injuries.
Now, one of the things there with personal injury, obviously, is that on the tort side, at least, right, is the length of time between the client coming in and again, it's going to settle. I mean, like the rare instance it goes to trial, but how do you kind of now
Yeah.
running your own practice? I mean, you didn't have to worry about this at pace, right?
Mhm.
As well, hey, they're going to cut me my salary every first and 15th or whatever. But now you're kind of waiting a lot on the settlements to sort of trickle in. I mean, when you're starting, it's going to take a longer time, and then eventually you'll catch up to it. But have you kind of looked at in terms of, I know you do have a few other areas there as well we were just talking about, but kind of going back to that question about financing, you have the ability to have someone, your husband there kind of looking at that and laying out the plan. Is there anything else in terms of those who want to start their own kind of personal injury practice that they should kind of keep in mind as well with that?
I think being flexible and just kind of creative is a really big help. So so there's a few things I actually did to ensure that I don't have to wait, 2 years before I start to make a profit. So one of those things was I focused on some referral sources that could send me files that are not at the very, they're very infancy. Like as you noted, like if I take a client from the very beginning, it's going to be at least like the very minimum that one of these files settles is a year if you're lucky. More likely like 18 months, but that's still pushing it sometimes. Very often it can be 2 3 years before a case settles. So it's obviously like a struggle. So what I did was I worked with a lot of paralegals who will handle the accident benefit side of things, and then at about 1.3 year mark, they'll send the tort to. So it speeds things up, and I get a lot of cases like that, and I've also had a lot of clients who just come to me from other lawyers unhappy. So I've got a lot of cases that are not right at the beginning. Like I've already started making money actually. Like I've already settled a bunch of cases, and then as well, um, wrongful termination cases isn't something I did previously, but it's something that these cases settle much quicker than personal injury cases. So that was one of the reasons I was interested. It's also a really interesting field of law. But the other thing I did, and this is kind of more on the creative side, is I looked at some of the bigger firms that I like. One of the firms I worked with, they had a huge glut of smaller cases that most of the senior teams didn't want. But to humor the referral sources, you have to take as what they offer you. You can't always say no to everything that's not amazing. So there has to be a balance. And then a lot of these firms end up with a lot of smaller cases that nobody wants, and that they're just kind of like collecting dust. So I contacted at least like one firm that I thought might need some help with some of those in that respect, and they actually did. So they hired me as an affiliate lawyer, and they gave me a bunch of like cases that were almost ready to settle. So like I have that going on the side, and it's thankfully also produced some fruit already. So, but being creative is just like a really, being in business, that's part of the fun of it, like thinking of unique ways of doing things. Like it's one of the things I really enjoy about having my own firm.
Yeah, and I think that's something unique there, right? I mean, try to get files at different stages, so you're kind of staggering it, and as some of the other things kind of work out as well. Now, I mean, I would be missing out. Some of my students have mock trial tonight, so they're looking,
Mhm.
their last minute advocacy tips, whether it's at a discovery or at um, no, even before the trial, obviously you could have tips in terms of negotiating with the
Mhm.
other parties, and certainly maybe you have any tips there in kind of leading up. I mean, obviously, like we just discussed, it's not like most things are going to trial anyways, but in either the discovery stage or in any kind of resolution or looking at settlement, kind of how to communicate with the other side as well as in the discovery, ways to get prepared for that process. Maybe you can share with my students.
So I guess one thing is, I don't want to say that, I changed my personality, but everybody has different aspects of their personality that they can tap into. And I always try and, relate to the person who I'm talking to. You know, eh, if you're the same person with everyone, then you're gonna run into a lot of walls. So I try and be flexible when I'm dealing with every person, every situation. Um, and I guess it helps. I mean, it sounds simpler than it is, but you can't just always be like that one vision of yourself that you think. Sometimes you just have to go in and be extra nice, and be huge. Like sometimes you have to be what's the word, a little more um have a little more humility. uh, the other thing that I find is really really helpful is listening to the other side clearly. A lot of times people just don't want to listen. Listening and understanding and responding from those issues. Like if you understand why the person is taking the position that they're taking, then you can maybe figure out how to understand and like address the problem. And sometimes you can find a creative solution to the problem. Um, a lot of people just hold their guns and they say, okay, well, this is what I want, so this is what I want. And if you just you know, if you're just steadfast in what you want and you're not willing to compromise in any way, then you're often not going to get what you want. So compromise is important. And again, sometimes creative solutions is necessary.
Now, well, one of the
Easier
things,
said than done, I appreciate, but
yeah, well, certainly easier said than done, but one of the things there that we've kind of touched on, and certainly really important both here for students and practitioners, given the lot of stress and anxiety in our field, there is kind of coping with all of that, and especially now you're opening your own practice, that adds another layer on top of that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I know everyone's different, but what maybe you can share, whether it's related to the pandemic or just related to your legal practice there, the ways that you can kind of take care of your own mental health and the importance of doing so in our
So
field.
important. That is so important. I mean, the first thing is I'm really lucky. I have a great family who's very supportive. I have a husband who's very supportive, and I have some amazing friends who are very supportive. Um, you know, Not everybody has that level of support, but as long as you have one person who you can go to, who you can talk to, and like say what's on your mind, I think it's important to be able to to rely on those people. And if you don't, there's the lawyer. What's it called? Sorry, the uh,
Member assistance program.
member assistance program, and I've used them before. I've gone through periods where I was incredibly stressed, and I didn't, like I just couldn't deal with my stress, like when I was more junior lawyer. And I called the member assistance program, and they were really helpful. They set me up with somebody who really helped me. So highly recommend that. Um, the other thing that I think is probably the most important, or I keep saying everything's the most important. Another thing that's very important is exercise. Like I know it's hard, especially right now, but I started I guess like 2 or 3 years ago, I started boxing, and then I recently got a new Muay Thai, like a Thai boxing coach, and we work out like 2 or 3 times a week, and it's the best therapy you can ask for. Like just physical activity is really, really good for the mind. So I highly recommend that, even if it's just like, like going out for once a day walking, but like when you're cooped up indoors because of COVID, it's not good for you. So, exercise, exercise, exercise. And then just having a little fun is also really important. It's good to just let your hair down because a lot of people don't. I know a lot of my friends who are in big law, for example, they were working crazy hours. They couldn't enjoy their life. It's not a lot of fun. You have all the money, but you don't have any time to enjoy it. So, again, it's really important to take care of yourself, your mental health, and your physical health as well. Actually, that's the last thing I would say about that. It's really important that you take care of your physical health because it's really easy when you're stressed to overlook, you know, what's going on with your body. And I've heard stories of people who had strokes because they were just so stressed dealing with all their work related problems. They ended up having a stroke. But a lot of these signs are things that can be prevented. So take care of your body. Like if something's going on, don't just ignore it because of work. Go see the fucking doctor and take care of it.
And the other thing and it's great advice there and great tips, and certainly, if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to be able to then go on and take care of your clients if you're got health issues that you have to deal with, or you're just not getting enough sleep, or you're just too busy, right? So the other thing I wanted to kind of address here just before we finish is certainly the diversity in our profession, and we've talked about this quite a bit over the time that we've
Mhm.
had this, and certainly. Looking at ways that our profession can kind of be more inclusive for all the various communities, and certainly you can speak
Mm.
to the ones that you belong to, and maybe share, and for students who may have similar backgrounds there, what can we do, and how is it getting into the profession, and have you noticed changes over the last 10 plus years you've been practicing?
I guess, I mean, yes and no. It's really sad. Like, one thing I noticed, for example, is they started doing the with the EDI hours. I can't remember what the abbreviation is. And like, I watched this one very lengthy CPD, and every single presenter was white, 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 and then they had like a 15-minute EDI thing where they didn't even have those people talking about anything except for EDI related issues. Like, everybody else is talking about like meaty law topics, and then they have a few like people of color talking about very, very briefly their experience, and then off they go and back to the white people. um, and I don't know what the solution is, but I think people need to be more. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the solution is. Like, we're a very, very forward thinking and very open firm. Like we have I think everybody in my firm is a person of color except for me. So um, but yeah, I don't know what the solution is, but people just need to understand that it's not acceptable anymore, and just gotta hire less white people based on the fact that they're white, and look at things more openly, I guess.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Josh, for taking the time here and joining us today, and sharing about your journey there. I mean, your time overseas, coming back then and going through law school, and falling in love with insurance law, and a little bit about insurance law and your practice, and again running your own practice. And I think that's really important for paralegal students in particular, because I think a lot more paralegal students that go and become licensed end up having their own practice, compared to those lawyers through law school. I think there's not as many firms set up for paralegals, and it's important to kind of know a little bit about what you're going to get into before you get into it. I was wondering if you have any final words of wisdom about anything that we've talked about, anything that you wanted to share as well with students who are looking to make the transition from studying and into the field of law and practicing.
Yeah, I guess just make sure you enjoy what you're doing. Sometimes people, start out in an area or in a job that they're not happy in. That doesn't have to be the case. And maybe you're working for a boss who's not treating you with respect. You do not have to. That doesn't have to be your life. So just make sure that you're doing something that's making you happy to wake up in the morning and go into work. And I know it's easier said than done, but you can strive for it. You don't have to give up on it because you found a job that you're comfortable in. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
All right, all the best, Josh. Thanks again for
Thank
joining
you so
us.
much for having me on. And as I said, I'd love to be a guest lecturer at one of your Trios College lectures. So let me know if I can ever help out there.
Yeah, definitely. When we have something, certainly in your field there, or we can figure out another time there to do something, and would love to have you share again some more of your experience. And thanks for everyone for tuning in as always. And we'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock for wrapping up the week. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Bye, JP.
Thanks so much, Josh. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Thanks, JP. Bye, everyone.
Thank you,